Okay, this video is the top 50 health books of all time. I'm only going to go through 5 per lecture, so this will be part 1 of 10 parts. And the 5 books we're going to go through today are going to be Starch Solution by Dr Mcdougall. I already made a video about that, so you can just watch my book reviews of that. I go into much more detail. I'm just going to briefly mention it here. Digestive Tune-Up by Dr. Dr Mcdougall. I'm going to briefly mention it here. I already made extensive lectures about that before as a book review. You can see all those videos. Fiber Fueled by Wm Bulsiewicz is what I put in the honorable mention category. Mcdougall's book's better, but for things that Mcdougall doesn't cover, Wm Bulsiewicz is pretty good. If there's ever a disagreement, go with Mcdougall over Bulsiewicz. But Bulsiewicz is good. In general, I say he's good. There's a couple little things I might disagree with him about, but I think he's a bright guy and he knows a lot, and he does it every day, so he's got a lot of daily experience with it. Okay, the next one is my book about Mcdougall. Then Denis Burkitt, I'll tell you about his biography, and Nathan Pritikin, I'll tell you about his books. That'll be it for today, so let's go to the next slide here. Okay, so here's basically Dr. Mcdougall's book, The Starch Solution, and this is sort of a foundation book. The most important thing you could know, the most important thing I learned in over 30 years of being a doctor is people should eat more starch. And Dr. Mcdougall makes it real clear. People should eat 90% of their calories from starch. If they do that, the more starch they eat, the healthier they're going to get. Because there's really healthy populations that eat more than 90% of their calories from starch. The Papua New Guinea were eating 93% of their calories from sweet potatoes. In the Asian countries, they used to eat about 90% of their calories from white rice, for example. Okay, so starch is the polymer of glucose, and the intestinal, first of all, it stretches your stomach, early satisfaction, hunger. Then it takes time for the enzymes to peel the fiber off the glucose, so you get slow absorption of glucose. You stay in the happy zone with normal blood glucose a prolonged amount of time, or only mildly elevated. It's what you want. It's the best food for satisfying hunger. I've given lectures on all this stuff before, and again, I have multiple lectures on this book, Starch Solution. It's the foundation of Dr. Mcdougall. Plus, if you ever want more detail on Dr. Mcdougall, just go to his website, drmcdougall.com. Go to his YouTube videos. There's tons and tons of them there, okay? All right, now I want you to know about Denis Burkitt. This is a great biography by Ethel Nelson, and it tells all about, he was a great man, Denis Burkitt. He's an Irish guy, did some of his residency surgery training in England. Then he went as a Christian missionary to Africa. He figured out the pattern of inheritance for Burkitt's lymphoma. They named it after him. He became in charge of epidemiology for Africa, and then he figured out patterns of disease by comparing the plant-based eating populations of Africa with the Western populations that ate, the high-fat diets. She's a physician as well, and she did a great job of writing this biography. It's a great book. It's very entertaining to read. It talks about how he traveled in a car with his friends all over Africa, seeing what was going on at the different hospitals. And the basic thing he figured out was abdominal pressure syndrome. I have entire separate lectures on abdominal pressure syndrome. How basically, fiber pulls water into the stool so it softens it so you don't get appendicitis. And defecation occurs by the liquidish stool. You should be popping out cow patties primarily when you defecate, or a stool very much like a cow patty. The bulky stool stretches the rectum, and then by reflex it just contracts and evacuates the stool once you open up the lower sphincter there. And the point being is when your stool's dried out and you're popping out goat pellets, it doesn't stretch the rectum wall, so you don't get as much of a reflex contraction. Therefore, you strain at the stool. It's called the Valsalva maneuver, and that straining at the stool causes back pressure, causes the stomach to pop into the chest, hiatal hernia, gastroesophageal reflux disease, inguinal hernias, varicose veins, varicocele in the scrotum, hemorrhoids in the butt, diverticulosis, diverticulitis, all this stuff. Okay, so I got longer lectures on that. By the way, the only lecture on the internet is on Dr. Mcdougall's YouTube channel for Dr. Denis Burkitt. He interviewed him. So I think that was in about 1972 or something. And it's a great interview, and you get to see Denis Burkitt in person. So that's a really good way to learn about him. And what I'm doing with these first 5 books is giving you just the basic foundation in nutrition. I'm going to go into all kinds of interesting, bizarre, complex stuff in a little bit here. But the first one is just, what everybody should know about nutrition that wants to study nutrition. Okay, the next one is Dr. Mcdougall's book, Digestive Tune-Up. It's an excellent book that very clearly takes you from the mouth to the butt, to the anus, and goes through all the common gastrointestinal problems. I put this book in here, Fiber Fueled by Wm Bulsiewicz, sort of as an honorable mention. It's not one of the top 50 books, but it's still a good book. And what I found is if there's something that Dr. Mcdougall didn't include, quite often Fiber Fuel. And Fiber Fuel is a much more recent book. This just came out a few years ago, whereas this book is older. So this will have a few topics that are relatively newer in good amounts of information being available. But whenever there's a disagreement, go with Mcdougall over Bulsiewicz. Like I said, he's a young guy. Young guy has to promote colonoscopy. He's a gastroenterologist, whereas Mcdougall doesn't. Mcdougall just says, look, screening colonoscopy is overrated. You're better off not doing it. You might want to consider getting a sigmoidoscopy, okay? Also, Bulsiewicz kind of is captivated by that researcher on microbiome, Knight, I believe is his name, who says, oh, you need more variety. That's not true. Mcdougall shows, look at all these epidemiology populations. A lot of them ate really simple diets, and they're really healthy. You don't need that much variety. Okay. And there's a few other topics. So whenever there's a discrepancy, go with Mcdougall over Bulsiewicz. But Bulsiewicz is still a good guy to learn from. For example, you can get your fiber just from eating plant foods. You don't need to take fiber supplements, all right? But again, this is worth knowing. There's other guys to know about who talk about microbiome, but in terms of the books, these are good ones to go. And of course, there's lectures. Dr. Mcdougall has very nice lectures. One where he does the upper digestive tract, and then a second one where he does the lower digestive tract, and he covers most of the material from this book, okay? This guy, Dr. Bulsiewicz, also he's got a lot of good lectures online as well. Okay, the next one I want to show you about is Nathan Pritikin, and probably the most interesting thing to get out of this is Pritikin's legacy book, and the only place you can find it is at Dr. Mcdougall's YouTube, actually Dr. Mcdougall's website, drmcdougall.com. If you go there, you can see a review of the medical literature, and this is Nathan Pritikin's very sophisticated analysis of the medical literature on lipids, on diabetes, and a bunch of other topics. Nathan Pritikin also has a really nice interview with Dr. Mcdougall at his site. Plus, his books are really good. Pritikin was a true genius, and he made money with his corporate enterprises, and then he was lucky enough he could be semi-retired and just focus on this nutrition stuff, and then made a nutrition business. Both his books are excellent. The logic is just so clear and concise. You can't beat it. And there's a nice reference section at the end. So I found a lot of good references here on why fat is so bad, why you don't really need to ever worry about getting your protein. Pritikin spent a long time really going through that literature. Dr. Mcdougall said Pritikin was his best mentor. And I'm telling you, this book is quite interesting. A lot of funny things, too. Like he said, all Americans are diabetic after dinner because they tend to all eat high-fat diets, almost all of them, leading to thus them being likely to fail their oral glucose tolerance test. Okay, and then this was just my most recent book on Dr. Mcdougall called John McDougall, the Doctor Who Fought for You, because he did a lot of things to fight for the patients that were detrimental to his own career financially and his reputation in the conventional medical community, because it doesn't make you popular when you go out of your way to help the pros, and especially when you contradict conventional medicine. It gets pissed off at you. So this reminds me a lot of John, and this reminds me a lot of Mary. So anyways, this is a quick summary I made of all his work. So it's real concisely available and collated together. And all the videos described in this, they come from Dr. Mcdougall's YouTube channel. And also I went through all of his newsletters. So anyways, that's our start on the basic introduction to nutrition. We'll go through a bunch of other stuff in the subsequent lectures. So that's the end of part 1 of Top 50 Health and Nutrition Books of All Time.